Seeing the process of making ancient fish knives in Taiwan, I finally understand why Taiwanese handmade iron knives have earned a place in the world knife rankings. They even have a remarkable presence in forging competitions. A supercar in the water is like tofu in front of them. Now, let's explore together the true fish knife. Let's see how it's made. Old Highway 87, Finglio Township, Pingdong County, Taiwan. A century-old shop, passed down through 3 generations. The first step in making a tuna knife. I start by taking an alloy steel plate. Then I use a tape measure to mark the specific length I need. Next, I put it into the furnace for continuous heating, and I have to strictly control the firing temperature. Only after the temperature reaches 900 degrees Celsius, do the workers slowly remove it, and promptly clean off the surface residue. Now, onto the second step, forging. A multi-ton air hammer rains down blows, relentlessly pounding. The steel plate quickly undergoes visible changes. It's then moved forward and hammered on both sides with a smaller hammer while still hot, so that the excess edges return to their position faster. And this step, I can only do by hand, slowly tapping it little by little. After the steel plate cools, I draw a thin line on one end and constantly measure it with a ruler. This shows the importance of this position. And then the most amazing step comes. The worker pressed down hard on the side cutter, and a distinct knife tip was created. If this were in our neighboring countries, just for this one part, they would need 3 to 5 processes to complete it. But our master craftsman in Taiwan can create the knife tip in just this one step. It still looks incredibly sharp. Now I understand how a shop can survive for a century. There's definitely a reason for it. The steel plate has now returned to room temperature, but the master craftsman's hammer shows no sign of stopping. The reason for the continuous hammering is mainly to fine-tune the blade. Hammer it down, hammer it down. Then I carefully observe the subtle changes in the fish knife. This rhythmic hammering makes the tedious forging process more distinctive. Now it has the basic shape of a knife. This stage is complete. Let's move on and prepare for the next step. The old master started the cutting machine, pressing down firmly as dazzling sparks flew from the side. The steel plate was quickly cut in two. He then continued heating it, and inserted one side of the fish knife under the power hammer. Repeatedly hammering, he shaped the handle. During the forging process, he kept rotating it, to ensure even force distribution. Let's take a closer look at the details of this fish knife. The visibly rough texture makes it hard to associate it with a knife. But what truly transforms it is the next step, blade sharpening. Anyone can roughly shape a knife, but its sharpness is a true test of skill. It's not just a simple grind on a grinding wheel. It can cut iron like mud. Now let's see how a knife, claimed to last 10 years, is actually sharpened. First, I grip both sides of the fish knife. I sharpen the blade, or width, at about 1/3 of the way down first. Then I repeatedly grind the tip of the knife at the same angle. After sharpening for a long time, the blade is now emitting an unusually bright light. He then picks up a ruler. He uses it to check the levelness of the blade from top to bottom. The ruler is being used as a level, making the most of it. He sharpens the blade once more. Now, let's take a look at the current state of this fish knife. The old craftsman's furrowed brow finally relaxes. He seems satisfied with the knife. Then he picks up a small hammer. He's preparing to stamp a unique mark on the blade. If he offsets those 3 dots a bit, it'll become the Big Dipper. He places it in the furnace to heat the tang. Then he inserts the tang into the wooden handle, using friction to make the inner hole smoother. This step maximizes the effect. He then begins to quench the blade. This is also an essential step in metalworking. After the blade is removed from the forge, it must be quickly plunged into the oil barrel. The flames momentarily illuminate the entire room. Quenching is mainly to improve defects in the steel structure, to induce martensitic transformation. After this, I'll have a fish knife with maximized toughness and strength. If I skip the quenching, the blade will become very brittle, and it will chip and break after a few uses. Now I hammer the wooden handle in. A cool-looking fish knife is now complete. But to make it incredibly sharp, able to cut iron like mud, this next step is clearly essential. I watched as the master craftsman took the blade and tirelessly ground it on the water wheel. In moments, the fish knife was sharpened to an exceptional edge. He then used clean water to remove the surface grime. When it comes to sharpening tuna knives, this blacksmith shop has its own secret, undisclosed method. It undergoes 3 grinding processes. From coarse to fine, each grinding changes it, thus making the blade's texture finer. After several minutes of grinding, the fish knife gleams like a mirror. It's hard to imagine that it was once a rusty steel plate. Let's test the effectiveness of this fish knife. The old master holds a newspaper. With a gentle swipe of his right hand, he slices the newspaper in half. Can you imagine this level of sharpness? It's no exaggeration to say it cuts iron like mud. Now let's see how it performs cutting fish. With one swift cut, the tuna is sliced open. This is an incredibly sharp tuna knife. How much do you think it would cost to buy?